Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt joins me now. Karoline, President Trump's going to speak with Xi Jinping later on today. Is this the start of some kind of negotiation over tariffs?
Well, as President Trump made it very clear with the signing of the 10% tariffs on China, he is no longer going to allow Chinese sourced, produced, and distributed fentanyl to flow through our southern and northern borders here in America. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death amongst young people in this country aged 18 to 34. And it is the president's utmost responsibility to protect American lives. That's why he implemented the 10% tariff on China. Now, President Xi did reach out to President Trump to speak about this, maybe to begin a negotiation. So we'll see how that call goes. As you saw, Canada and Mexico both conceded to President Trump, agreeing to help us in securing our territorial borders. And so we will see how the conversation with President Xi goes. But as of now, the 10% tariff has been in effect, and President Trump is going to continue to stand up for the American people.
Okay, if we got something from Xi Jinping about the drug situation, that could be the start of a serious negotiation, I suspect. But let me move on. Listen to what President Trump said about Elon Musk's powers at Doge. Roll it.
Well, he's got access only to letting people go that he thinks are no good if we agree with him, and it's only if we agree with him. He's a very talented guy from the standpoint of management and costs, but they're finding tremendous amounts of really bad things, bad spending. Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval.
Karoline, Musk has access to the payment system and U.S. aid. What bad things has he found?
Well, first of all, let me say, Stu, I think it's quite comical how fascinated the legacy media is with Elon Musk working on behalf of President Trump. This is what President Trump campaigned on. Elon Musk is a highly respected, once-in-a-generation business leader who is volunteering his time to help make our federal government more efficient. And President Trump talked about that on the campaign trail. The American people elected President Trump to do exactly what Elon Musk is helping President Trump do. And when it comes to U.S. aid, Elon Musk and his team have found egregious spending, federal tax dollars being wasted on things like transgender comic books in foreign countries. Tens of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars going out the door every year on things that do not align with our priorities here in the United States of America. And so that's been President Trump's main goal since day one, ensuring that every penny that goes out from Washington, D.C. aligns with his America First principles. And that's certainly true when it comes to foreign aid. The American taxpayers have been funding just useless priorities overseas, and it's unfair. And Elon Musk is helping President Trump in identifying these receipts and clawing back some of that wasteful spending.
The president's moving at breakneck speed. What can you tell me about the plan to shut down the Department of Education?
Well, I won't get ahead of President Trump on any announcements, but that is something that he campaigned on. And it goes back to his wanting to make this government accountable to the American taxpayer. And when you look at the literacy rates, the math and the reading rates of young children and students in America, they are not good. Our nation's report card was released last week, and it showed that only 40% of fourth graders are reading at a proficient level. So clearly, the tens of millions of dollars that the Department of Education is spending every single year is not working, and President Trump wants to empower parents to have a greater say in their child's education system. He signed 2 executive orders on the education front last week. As for the Department of Education, to be TBD on an announcement there.
So you can't confirm that he is going to try to abolish the Department of Education. You can't confirm that for us?
I will say that President Trump campaigned on that promise, and I think the American people can expect him to deliver on it.
Okay, let's turn to immigration, if we may. Trump's team has gotten Venezuela and El Salvador to agree to take back criminal migrants that we deport. What threats were made to these countries to get them in line?
Well, they have seen that President Trump is not messing around, and he's no longer going to allow America to be a dumping ground for illegal criminals from nations all over this world. And so El Salvador has not just agreed to the repatriation of their own citizens, but also illegal criminals from other nations who will then be sent to their prisons. Venezuela as well has agreed to repatriation flights, and Colombia also agreed to cooperate with the repatriation of illegal Colombian nationals that we have found in the interior of our country. And I can also confirm that today, the first flights from the United States to Guantanamo Bay with illegal migrants are underway. And so President Trump, Pete Hegseth, and Kristi Noem are already delivering on this promise to utilize that capacity at Gitmo for illegal criminals who have broken our nation's immigration laws and then have further committed heinous crimes against lawful American citizens here at home.
Quick comment. New Jersey's Governor Phil Murphy said he had an illegal migrant living in his home. He's since walked that back, but he tried to challenge the administration. What do you make of that?
Very interesting comment. I will say that this administration will hold Democrat governors and leaders across the country accountable if they break the law, if they harbor illegal aliens, or if they are not abiding by the federal immigration laws. This administration is focused on enforcing those laws, and we will ramp up prosecutions of those who are not abiding by our nation's immigration laws.
You are one of the busiest people in America these days, and we thank you for taking time out to be with us this morning. Karoline Leavitt, thank you very much indeed.
Sure.